Hello and welcome to another episode of Varsity360. I am Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined today by Will Denner. And Will, we are officially in the home stretch of the high school football season. 2 weeks to go after a very consequential week 7 with a bunch of huge games. We're here to break it all down, set the table for the last 2 weeks of the regular season, and once again coming to you from the First Pacific Financial Studio. Thanks to again for the access that they're giving us to talk about high school sports. And like I say, when you support high school sports, you support the community, and that's all what First Pacific Financial is all about. But let's get right into it. What we're going to do today, we're just going to look back at week 7 and some of the massive games that happened in the 4A Greater St. Helens League, the 3A Greater St. Helens League, the 2A Greater St. Helens League, and the 1A Trico League, and how those results set the stage for the last 2 weeks of the season. We have some league titles that are still to be decided. We have playoff berths to be decided. But let's get right into looking back at week 7 in the 4A Greater St. Helens League. And obviously the big game, Camas knocking off Skyview 21-9. Camas's defense coming through with a huge performance there, and that offensive line paving the way for Titan Brody, allowed the Papermakers to really dictate the tone of that game. And Camas finds themselves in the driver's seat in the 4A Greater St. Helens League. But Skyview, they can't waste any time kind of feeling sorry for themselves. They have a huge game coming up this Friday against a battleground team that is still undefeated, 7-0, put themselves in a great position for a postseason berth by beating Union. What'd you see from Battleground, Will, on Thursday that makes you think that they might give Skyview a pretty good challenge this week?
Absolutely. I think after Battleground, rolled through those first 6 weeks of the season, they obviously were turning some heads, but this was kind of the legitimizing moment for them, proving that, with a win in the 4A Greater St. Helens League over one of Union, Skyview, or Camas for the first time since 2016, that kind of elevated them to another level. And I think we kind of just have to pause for a second to really give kudos to Battleground and head coach Mike Woodward, who from the start of this season going back to the spring and into the summer was saying how, special this group could be. And, sometimes coaches kind of shy away from that, not wanting to put that type of target on their back. But he saw it from the start and gave them their kudos, and they've risen to the occasion. And now against Skyview, I mean, we'll see exactly how big of a test they give them. But I think, after a few weeks of, maybe kind of trying to see where exactly Battleground stood in this 4A Greater St. Helens League, I think they've really proven that they can hang. So I believe that after last week's performance, they had a great defensive stand against Union. I think they forced 5 turnovers in that game. They had a nice balanced offense between passing, running. I think they'll give Skyview a legitimate shot.
Yeah, I think that's always the unique thing with the 4A Greater St. Helens League, with it being only a 4-team league. You have 2/3 of the season basically taken up by non-league preseason games, if you will. I don't want to call them preseason games because obviously they all count, but you always end up with a 3-week gauntlet at the end of the regular season where everything gets sorted out. And Battleground obviously used its 6 preseason games, non-league games, to great effect, being that they have hit the league season running. They get that crucial win in a season where 3 of the 4 teams are going to advance to the Week 10 postseason. Now Battleground is proving that, they can be, basically they can hang with anybody, like you said.
Absolutely. And I mean, on the Skyview side, after, a game that they really wanted against Camas, obviously, to snap that losing skid. They don't have much time, obviously, to regroup now, and they have to get right back to it against Battleground, and after suffering their first loss of the season. So, like you said, really no time, and to get right back to these huge games down the stretch of the regular season.
Yeah, with only 3 league games, there's no margin for error. You look at the league standings, you obviously have Camas and Battleground both at 1-0. Skyview and Union 0-1. Battleground and Skyview, one of the teams is going to be 1-1 after this week. Camas, obviously, they play Union. They'll be favored in that game on Friday. But then it leads to week 9, where depending on what happens between Skyview and Battleground, you could have Skyview playing Union. If they drop this game against Battleground, they might be playing for their playoff lives. Or Battleground, they'll want to get this win to kind of ensure their spot, because they'll close the season with Camas. But obviously, with only 3 games there, it's going to be massively consequential what happens this Friday.
For sure. And not to overreact, obviously, to one game, but who's to say that Battleground couldn't give Camas a little bit of a test in week 9, potentially? I mean, I think Camas is clearly in the driver's seat now, but, it only takes one game really to shake up the whole thing. So be interesting to see what happens in these next 2 weeks.
Yeah, so obviously the 4A Greater St. Helens League, it's a very condensed league schedule. The 3A Greater St. Helens League, also a condensed league schedule with 5 teams, but there was a massive result that happened this last Friday in one of the games of the year up at Kelso. Mountain View edging the Highlanders 35-34 in overtime. It was just a roller coaster game, back and forth. 2 of the league's best running backs, 2 of the area's best running backs going toe-to-toe, and Porter Drake for Mountain View and Aiden Mintonia for Kelso. But, I just loved how this game played out. It goes to overtime after Mountain View blocks a field goal on the last play of regulation. Mountain View scores their first possession of overtime on a Cash Cook run. Kelso, which had run the ball so well, Aiden Montoya, 214 yards, 5 touchdowns. He takes it in for Kelso on their last their possession of overtime. Yeah, Kelso rolls the dice. They go for 2, trying to end the game right then and there. And for the first time, really, Mountain View's defensive front stuffs Kelso on the try, stuffs Aiden Montoya, and gets out of there with a 35-34 win. You normally see kids after a game like that pretty hyped and jumping around. That was the case for a few minutes there, but then you could just feel the exhaustion when I talked to some of the Mountain View kids afterwards. They just had to give everything and left it all out on the field to get a huge win that basically clinches the league title for Mountain View. Mountain View, they'll conclude their league play this Friday in Heritage. They'll be massive favorites in that game, assuming nothing crazy happens and they take care of business. Mountain View will have run the gauntlet in the 3A Greater St. Helens League and win the league title for the 6th time in the last 8 years. But there's still a lot to be sorted out in the 3A Greater St. Helens League. Evergreen and Prairie, they are still right there, and they have a massive game this Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. Prairie gets that key win earlier this season against Kelso that keeps them right in the hunt of things. And last year when these 2 teams played, Evergreen and Prairie, that was another big one for Evergreen and trying to take a step to get toward the top 2 or 3 of that league. And Prairie ends up winning that game on a very rain-soaked afternoon at McKenzie Stadium. Just kind of one of those weird, fluky games. I don't think there's any rain in the forecast as of Friday right now, but it's just one of those games, it seems like, where even regardless of the records, Prairie could easily, give Evergreen a tough test there. And Evergreen really needs this one because after this, they're going to go play Kelso in that week 9 game. So really need to get a win here to keep in the top 2 of that league.
Yeah, for Evergreen, you want this win on Friday to get a little bit of a buffer against Kelso, because regardless of Kelso, let's look at the league standings. Mountain View obviously on top, undefeated. Then you have Evergreen at 1-1, and then Prairie right behind them. And Kelso is the hard luck team in this. They're 1-2 in league play, but those 2 losses, one coming on the last second field goal to Prairie, where Kelso, a late interception kind of doomed them. And then obviously the heartbreaker last Friday against Mountain View. So you can't write off Kelso. Any team that can run the ball like that is going to give some teams some problems. So both Evergreen and Prairie, really, they control their postseason destiny. And this Friday is going to go a long way to see which team is in the driver's seat to controlling their destiny.
For sure. And between Prairie and Kelso specifically, they haven't really had much of any luck outside of this league. I think Prairie's only win was that Kelso game, and then Kelso is 2-5. But it only takes one or two in this league to kind of shake things up. And while Mountain View's in the driver's seat, those next three of Kelso, Evergreen, and Prairie are right in the mix still, and these next 2 weeks are gonna be kind of insane, I think, for those three.
Well, I'm looking for Evergreen to really kind of kick it into gear at this point. Yeah. They've kind of gotten bit by the injury bug. It looks like Fox Crater is kind of back from his injury, the high ankle sprain, and so that's a huge boost for the Plainsmen and their offense and what they want to do, especially on the running attack. But yeah, it's we're going to see which team is going to end up kind of in the driver's seat for that number 2 seed this Friday when Evergreen and Prairie go at it.
Absolutely.
Let's go to the 2A Greater St. Helens League. Obviously, the league, we've talked about it a lot, the most chaotic league. And let's just say that between the 4A Greater St. Helens League, the 3A GSHL, and the 2A GSHL, it's looking like all of our league championship predictions are going down in flames.
What do we know?
We're 0 for 3 on that. But the 2A GSHL, we actually have some clarity after last week. Last week, Will, you were at what turned out to be a really consequential game between Woodland and Hudson's Bay. Woodland really pulling away in the second half, pouring it on, breaking. That game was tied at halftime.
I believe it was a 10-point or 7-point game. But yeah, Woodland holds Bay scoreless after halftime and ends up winning. I think it was like 41-10.
41-10.
Yeah, pretty dominant performance.
And obviously Elijah Anderson doing what he does, 5 touchdowns in that game. But the consequence of that result and Ridgefield's win over Columbia River last week is everything is moving toward a Week 9 showdown at the end of the regular season between Ridgefield and Woodland. Ridgefield and Woodland are both going to play games this Friday where they'll be favored. Woodland is going to take on Mark Morris. They'll be favored in that one. Ridgefield's taking on Ari Long. They'll be favored in that one. And then the Spudders and the Beavers clash Week 9. Both should, right now they sit tied atop the 4A or 2A Greater St. Helens League at 4-1. So I fully expect those two teams to be 5-1 in league play heading into that massive Week 9 clash. Who do you think might have the edge in that? Not to look too far ahead.
Well, I think I'd give Ridgefield a slight edge as of right now. I think and a lot of that has to do with home field advantage too. I think that's part of it. But Woodland has really taken a massive step this year, and they were getting a lot of buzz in the preseason as a team that was going to elevate, and they've proven it. They got that win at Washougal to open up the slate that was huge. This game against Bay, obviously last week, was big for them to separate themselves. And even though they had that stumbling game against River that they were kind of lamenting on after Friday's game, they've put themselves in position to compete for the league title in Week 9. But Ridgefield, I think they seem to be hitting their gear right now. Last week it was Clyde Stevens who had just a massive rushing game. I think he rushed just under 300 yards, and with Rocco Wright out of the game against River, he kind of took on the load. They're still doing the 2 quarterback thing with Logan DeBeaumont and Braden Mayella. But yeah, it seems like they're hitting their stride at the right time. They had that early loss to Bay, but they've bounced back. They went to Washougal and won that game. Took care of business last week against River. So I would give Ridgefield the slight edge, but I mean, when you have a player like Elijah Anderson on Woodland's side, I mean,
total X factor.
You can't count them out. And they've also been talking to Sean McDonald, their head coach, after Friday's game. They've been, to this point, pretty fortunate with injuries as well. They don't have the most depth, but they've stayed healthy, and that's been huge for them. So yeah, I expect it to be a close one. I'd give Ridgefield just a slight edge though.
Yeah, one more thing to talk about with Woodland is we talk so much about Elijah Anderson, but one person who I think we maybe overlook is their quarterback, Brett Martinowitz, who having some experience at that position is always a huge deal.
For sure, yeah, and they didn't even really pass the ball very much on Friday. That was another kind of wet game. So it was a run-heavy attack, but where Martinowitz really shined was on defense. He actually had 2 interceptions, 2 of Woodland's 4 turnovers, and that went a long way for them in stopping a couple bay drives in the red zone. So, yeah, they have the experience. They have, a linebacker like Jess Starr, who's kind of one of the leaders of their defense. They have a good group of outside linebackers and defensive linemen. Pretty experienced group overall.
Well, so we know that Ridgefield and Woodland are kind of head to collision course for the number 1 and 2 seed in that league. Now, 3 and 4 get pretty interesting. Washougal, our preseason pick to win the league, is probably looking at that number 3 seed.
Yeah.
And, they'll be favored in their last 2 games. They're going to play Columbia River, and then they end the season with Hawkinson. But that number 4 seed, it's going to be a really interesting, I guess, chase for it. Starting this Thursday, we have a Thursday game between 2 teams that I didn't really think would be that deep in the postseason mix, Hudson's Bay and Hawkinson.
Yeah.
This game is going to turn out to be massively consequential for one team looking to make the postseason.
It's going to be huge. Starting with Bay, they started the season 5-0, and they've had a couple tough ones now against Washougal and Woodland. 2 teams near the top of the league, but their play really in those opening weeks of the league slate have still put them in this position to compete for the postseason. And then Hawkinson, a team that really started out the year kind of, a couple tough ones. They lost big to La Center and Evergreen the first couple weeks, but they've found something these past few weeks. It seems like, as a team that's kind of known for their quick hitting, pass heavy, up tempo attack, they've kind of gone to more of a run heavy scheme and have now really turned to their starting quarterback, Andon Stenerson, who had a huge game last week against Mark Morris. And yeah, they've put themselves in the mix despite, a tough start to the season, but they've stuck with it. And yeah, this game at Kiggins Bowl on Thursday is going to be huge.
Well, you touched on it. Hawkinson, their fortunes really turned in that week 6 game against Columbia River when they redevoted themselves to the run, really established that. And I think by consequence of that kind of opens things up for Centerson.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's another 2 teams that kind of prefer to run right now. And last week it was Woodland who really rose to that occasion, and stopping Bay's attack of the Bauman brothers, and it was it's going to be, I think, a game that comes down to those offensive lines once again, and 2 defenses that obviously kind of know where the ball may be going, but just how do you stop it?
And with how crazy this league has been, Hawkinson, if they can get the win Thursday, they get Washougal in week 9. And who's to say something crazy couldn't happen there? I mean, obviously, Washougal, they're going to be a favorite against Columbia River this Friday. Yeah. And then they'll probably be a favorite if they play like they have in the last 2 weeks. They'll be favored against Hawkinson in week 9. But if the 2A Greater St. Helens League has shown us anything, it's that we really don't know anything when it comes to predicting these games. The teams are so evenly matched in that league that anything can happen at any given point. A few plays here, a big performance there, and suddenly you have a result that nobody expected.
There's going to be 1 or 2 teams, I think, who are going to be very bummed at the end of the season to not make the postseason because it's just been so tough week in and week out. But it's going to be a really exciting next couple of weeks in this league. Well,
let's go to the Trico, and we had another kind of game of the year candidate last Friday. La Center rallies from 13-0 down to beat Seton Catholic 14-13. Just a great defensive matchup there. Seton Catholic showing that it has closed the gap with La Center, which has traditionally been the team at the head of the Trico League. Well, Seton Catholic is, just one step behind La Center, and not a big step either. So what we know, La Center is first place in the Trico League, undefeated in league play. Seton is right behind them there.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think La Center scored until midway through the 4th quarter in that game, and Seton's defense was playing really well. It's already been kind of a season of firsts for them. The week before they beat Castle Rock for the first time in program history, and were right there against Le Center. But, I know there's no moral victories, but I think they have to still be pleased with where they're at and closing that gap, like you said. And it was interesting kind of to see Le Center head coach John Lambert's comments after the game too, that, Seton Catholic's rise is a good thing for that league and kind of, being more of a test for teams at the top. And those two have, they showed this year that it's not that big of a gap. And even though Le Center is still the favorite, Seton Catholic is not far behind.
Yeah, I totally second what Coach Lambert said, in that it's great to have that other team in your league that really tests you, almost treats it like it made last week's game feel like a postseason game.
For sure.
And that's kind of been Le Center's thing in recent years, as they've run through the Trico League, but then ran into a pretty tough opponent in the state playoffs, and not be last year, whether it was Kashmir or, going back, it's been a few years now since Le Center was able to make the state semifinals like they did in back-to-back years. But I think having a test like Seton Catholic, a team that was, I think, number 2 in the 1A RPI, right up there at the top, shows that you're getting a test against one of the state's best 1A teams before really all the chips are down in the postseason. And for Seton Catholic, I think what they saw is, like, we had Le Center.
Yeah.
We were ahead. We were in position to win that football game. And so that has to give the Cougars, as they continue to go through this uncharted territory, it's like, whoa, we're 6-0. We're, do we belong? Well, after this Friday, I don't think there is any doubt that Seton Catholic belongs.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think even in a loss like that, that's a huge moment for their program. And Le Center, like we said, they're still in the driver's seat. They have to play Castle Rock week 9. That's in recent years kind of been a deciding league title type of game. But yeah, Le Center is still in that driver's seat, and now we just kind of have to wait and see how things shake out these next 2 weeks.
Well, and the final puzzle piece to kind of fall into place in the Trico, this Friday's game between Castle Rock and Kingsway will go a long way to deciding that. Right now, Castle Rock and Kingsway both in the hunt for one of those 4 playoff berths, and whoever wins this game, I think, pretty much puts themselves in a great position to clinch one of those berths. Castle Rock, like you said, in recent years has kind of been right there, in that second seed.
Yeah.
But Kingsway is a team that I think is starting to put a few things together. They had a big win against Fort Vancouver, where that they controlled the entire way, and Kingsway playing with a little bit of confidence. We'll see if they can keep up with Castle Rock, but Kingsway has put themselves in a position to play a meaningful Week 8 game.
Yeah, big game for Ryan Charlton last week. Kingsway against Fort Vancouver. I think he had 3 touchdowns and forced a fumble on defense. Really a moment I think that program needed. First-year head coach and Dale Rule, and kind of stumbled a bit out of the gate, but they get a big win, and they've still put themselves in position to possibly contend. And then Castle Rock, they stumbled recently against Seton, but they still have a couple big games left and can fight their way back into this postseason picture.
All right. Well, Week 8 is upon us. We have 2 weeks of the regular season to go. Still a lot to be decided. Still league titles to be won. Playoff spurts to be clinched. And we'll see a lot of the pieces kind of fall into place this Friday, Week 8 of the regular season, and we'll be here to cover it all. 360preps.com. Join us next week for another episode of Varsity 360, where we will put it all into place and try to figure this thing out.
Can't wait.
Goodbye, everyone.